Hi students, this is Dr. Soundriya here. I'm here to explain you Construction Management and Entrepreneurship's module number 3. The topic for today's discussion is confidentiality and conflicts of interest. Now let us move on to the video. The topic for this video is conflicts of interest, confidentiality and whistleblowing. Conflicts of interest. When two opposing interests collide with each other, it is called conflicts of interest. When an employee gives importance to his or her personal benefit over the firm's where he is working, and when he opts for personal gain at the expense of the company's goal, it is called as conflicts of interest. A conflict of interest occurs when the independent judgment of a person is influenced or may be influenced by an external factor from making decisions that is in the best interest of others who are relying on that judgment. For example, like co-workers or the firm. For an example, an employee employed by the government for the construction of a bridge trying to favor a particular private firm for the procurement of concrete by bypassing the norms set for the government. This is one best example for conflicts of interest. There are two types of conflicts of interest. Number one, created by interest in other companies. Number two, created by insider information. Conflict of interest created by interest in other companies. Serving as a consultant for the competitor company. Serving under personal interest, that is making investments in a competitor's company. Example, partial ownership, buying stocks. Having a spouse or a family member working at the subcontractor's firm while granting contracts. Example, a wife of a person working for a steel manufacturer that gets the subcontract. Tempting customers away from the current employer and towards the competitor. Example, downplaying the company's portfolio, withholding favorable information about the product services of interest created by insider information. Using inside information from the primary company to set up another business for oneself, family or kids. The best example is Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. Buying stocks of the same company as the employer through information that is not available to the public. Example, selectively purchasing a profitable stock. Using company secrets to threaten your employer, which is otherwise called as blackmail. Example, leaking information even before securing the patent rights. Lack of proper information or clarity on grounds of objectionable conflicts of interest. Example, using loopholes in the terms and conditions set by the employer. Good judgment due to conflicts of interest. Example, having a family member within a subsidiary company. The information about the primary company and the competitor can cloud one's judgment while serving a client. Example, natural bias leading to reduced involvement. Go to the three different types of conflicts of interest. The first one is the straight conflict of interest or the actual conflict of interest. The second one is potential conflicts of interest or it is directed towards the future. So there are two types in that. One is called as the gift and the other one is called as the bribe. The third one is apparent conflict of interest, that is which is visible. So it's an interest with other companies, moonlighting and insider information. Now let's see the different types in the next few slides. Actual conflict of interest. It refers to loss of neutrality in the decision-making ability and the inability to faithfully carry out the professional duties to the employer. For example, an engineer is biased towards a subcontract due to the possibility of a kickback. So the term kickback means commission. So there are many ways in which outside influence can give way to conflicts of interest. The principal way of identification is through the general test. A general test is nothing but the possibility of an outside interest influencing a professional's judgment in discharging her role. Example, through internal audit and review. Conflicts of interest. It refers to the possible conflict of interest due to the presence of a spouse or a family member or a close friend in another firm other than the employer's. Example, kickbacks negotiated through the family member of a company that doesn't meet the standards of your employer. It's based on the thin line that separates gifts and bribe. So bribe is otherwise called as a favor or special interest. So what's kickback? It's the bribes given to a person for contracts obtained due to his or her efforts. It's just like a commission. Now let's see the difference between bribes and gifts. There is a very thin line between bribes and gifts. So what is a bribe? It is something which is given before the work is finished, whereas gifts is something which is given after the work is done. Bribe is a very large substantial amount. Gifts are very small amount or articles of daily use. Bribes usually lead to substandard result. Gifts needn't necessarily lead to substandard results. Bribe is given for an undue favor which is expected in return. Gifts may lead to an expectation of a favor or a gesture acknowledging the favor already carried out. Bribe damages the goodwill and image of the company, whereas gifts doesn't damage the image of the organization. In certain cases, gifts are encouraged by companies and organizations for improved and sustained relationships. Number 3. Apparent conflict of interest. It refers to a clear bias in the professional conduct of an employee within the company's operational limits. The job is carried out in such a way that it promotes the self-interest of a person at the expense of the company. Example, an employee deliberately making an expensive design to get a large commission for himself or for the use of office funds for non-official purposes. Interest in other companies. Having a professional interest on a company outside of your employer. It may be a competitor or a subcontractor. Example, holding shares in the competitor's business while working for another company. Moonlighting, a very important term. It refers to the act of working for two different firms and is bound to lead to a conflict of interest when the employee also works for the competitor. It may also lead to reduced performance at both ends. Insider information. Usage of an inside information to his or her advantage or to start a new business. For example, Bill Gates' ideas and Mark Zuckerberg shares. Solving conflict of interest problems. The best method is use of moral choices. The clear and easy choice where the benefit of many outweigh the benefit of the self. Example, choosing public health over the profits of your company. Finding the middle path, that is, a balance that satisfies public good as well as the company's goals. Creative intelligence is a necessity for this balance. Example, construction of environmentally sustainable buildings. Going by a person's gut feeling, when an obvious balance is not possible, this going by gut feeling is generally chosen. Example, solutions based on previous experiences, which gives long-term benefits. Conditions that lead to conflicts of interest. A professional exercise good judgment on behalf of the interest of the employer. The professional has some other interest that could threaten his good judgment while serving a client. Ways to avoid conflict of interest. Following companies' set guidelines. In the absence of such provisions, that the prior permission or advice of your co-worker or your higher officer like a manager or GM must be sought. When both provisions are absent, one should examine their motive behind their actions and use the method that is in alignment with the ethical principles. It's very important. One can refer to the universal guidelines of the Professional Code of Ethics because engineers and doctors and other professionals are guided by Professional Code of Ethics, which universally resist conflicts of interest. Explicit situations are listed in it under which one can compare their situation and confirm if his situation qualifies the condition for conflict of interest. Confidentiality. Information that's kept secret within the organization. Example, in government departments and firms, they keep few informations confidential. Engineers and other employees are expected to keep such informations confidential as a matter of the duty. It's an integral part of ethical principles associated to many professions. Example, mobile service providers, lawyers, etc. Unauthorized leaks of such information are considered as serious offenses, both within and outside the department. Examples of confidentiality or confidential information. Any information that the company deems fit to be confidential. Example, data of a company's processes. Information about the conduct of their business. Test results and data. Product design or formulas. Number of employees engaged in a project. Supplier identity. Marketing strategies or techniques. Production costs and production yields. Types of confidential information. There are two types. One is the privileged information, the other one is the proprietary information. Privileged information. Information available to a select few on the basis of special privilege allotted by the company. It usually consists of information that is not available to the public domain. Example, processes or projects under research and development. Proprietary information. Information that a company owns legally, also known as trade secret and subjective to private ownership. It may be in the form of a data regarding processes or designs. Such information are legally protected by patents and unauthorized duplication will result in legal action. For example, a very new technology developed. No such absolute protection exists for trade secrets and the company cannot claim monopoly over such information. Example, KFC's secret ingredients and algorithms of various companies. Obligation of confidentiality. So number one is based on the moral considerations and number two is based on the major ethical theories. When I say based on moral considerations, respect for autonomy, respect for promise, and regard for the public well-being comes into play. Based on moral considerations, respect for autonomy, legal recognition of private information allows the firm to maintain privacy and take measures to protect their self-interest. Respect for promise. Respecting and honoring promised obligations as per the employer's contract. Example, non-disclosure agreements. Regard for public well-being. A degree of confidentiality is required to pass on the benefits to a consumer or a client in a free market. Example, pharma industry. Based on major ethical theories. All theories promote an employer's moral autonomy in deciding the information they wish to share with the public. These rights are protected as an extension of the responsibility to protect the overall interest of the company. All the theories like rights, ethics, duty ethics, and unilateralism justify this concept of confidentiality in different ways. What happens to the confidentiality doctrine when an employee leaves the company? Or we can call it the effect of change of job. Employees are required to protect confidential information regarding former employment even after vacating the job. The confidentiality agreement between the employer and employee stands valid beyond the period of his or her employment. The employer cannot force an employee from not seeking another job under a different employer. Whistleblowing, a very important topic in today's world. A person who exposes information or activity that is deemed illegal, unethical, or not in terms with the organization's policies. It is comparatively dangerous and risky for employees under public institutions as they are governed by the government. Whistleblowers are protected by the law and they are aimed at keeping a check on the corrupt practices and misconduct of an organization for the public good. It's entirely an ethical decision and cannot be forced. Reasons for whistleblowing. Violation of company policy, rules and regulation. Example, not following protocols. Threat to public interest. Example, pollution. Threat to national security. Collusion with foreign governments. Fraud and corruption. Example, tax violations. So the person who does whistleblowing generally is going to be within the company and he is going to tell what doesn't fall in line with the rules and regulations set by the company itself or by the government. So this person is someone who is going to show the wrong things done within his company itself. Types of whistleblowing, internal and external. The accusations are brought before the management and not to any external agency. So the accusations can be brought to either the HR or the general manager. Individuals that expose such information on fraud or wrongdoings to the senior within the company are known as internal whistleblowers. Most whistleblowers are the internal type. Establishment of complaint systems within the company increases the chances of such reporting by the employees. It is actually good for the company to have such internal whistleblowers who will show what is wrong being done inside the company. This will in turn credit to the growth of the company. External whistleblowing. The accusations are reported to an outside agency, example media or law enforcement agencies. Whistleblowers usually expose wrongdoings to external agencies based on the seriousness and severity of the activity. Whistleblowers can go through risks like individual harm, public trust damage, threat of national security. They face stiff retaliation from the firm because they are going to complain about their working place to the media or to the law. They may even lose jobs. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you understood the basics of confidentiality, conflicts of interest, and whistleblowing.